Oh, I'm wearing my Superman shirt today. See, it says Superman on it. The visual, uh, this is slightly too small. My wife thought it was pretty witty if I came and wore this shirt. I guess Visual is a company, and so I'm now wearing their logo, but it may as well be my company, or in this case, it might be Max Meldrum's company. So I'm wearing it to to carry forth a conversation about Max Meldrum that I wasn't asked to do by anybody in particular, except that in private, Jazz asked me to what I thought of Max Meldrum. I'd never seen his book. He wrote a book called The Science of Appearances. And of course, and he said, it sounds like what you're talking about. And of course, it's so precisely what I'm talking about that it's I guess you could say a thrill to have found it. And I want to recommend it to everybody if you can figure out how to find it. There was one copy out there where the book dealers are going to be so happy if nobody's bought it yet. It was up for $380 or something. I don't know what. And online somewhere. So maybe if you go to Australia or the UK, you can find it for some better price. I don't know. But The Science of Appearances, Max Meldrum. He was a guy roughly the age of Gamble, if I want to say that. Am I right about that? Yeah, I want to say. I'm trying to remember now. He was born within a few years, I think, of Gamble, but his training in Europe, whatever it was, eventually led him to, and he's apparently Australian, but he wound up in Australia. But it led him to rather treating this like a science. And in some ways, the writing is, almost unfortunate because of, he goes on in ways that are, for the purposes of a painter, are far too fine, and in some ways off-putting because of it, and require more work out of the auditor. But I'm just going to share with you a couple points that he makes to explain to you what we have in common and what you, if you actually want to be a master of your world, have to master. And I'm talking about, the mastery of the visual world. Your first job is not to be an artist. Your first job is to master the visual world. If you want to even be in that place where you can compare yourself with anybody with mastery. Oh, by the way, I thought this was pretty cool too. That this shirt here is rather in keeping with this. The Joseph DeCamp from that Indiana. Is it Indiana, Georgia, Atlanta? Maybe I can't remember what museum that's in. Let me just read these to you and tell you what I directly take from them. I'm going to read one and talk, okay? So, and I'm going to see if I can be efficient here. This could go on all day, and I don't want to do that a second time in a row. But he talks about the objective analysis of ocular sensation. So, ocular sensation, what you see with your eyes. The world of things must cease. The artist must make his investigations within the particular phase of perceptivity in which ocular, that's eye, phenomena are sensed and defined as such, right? So you're talking about things like color. You're talking about values and the sorts of things you can work with your eyes. And all that you can reproduce is those things. I mean, pigment only does that. It can give you a color, it can give you a darker or lighter, and you can make it in bigger or smaller masses, and you can do things to those spots in which those various masses run into each other. So if you understand that, I mean, the most difficult thing for me was that at the beginning, everybody's told to study anatomy. So I studied anatomy, and I drew bones, and I memorized the names, and I read 5 different anatomy books, none of which I remember any of at this point. Drawing a figure for 3 years gives you way more sense of whether you look when you're drawing a figure, for example, out of your head, whether your anatomy is correct. But I noticed when I was a student that I was drawing bones, and I said, Paul, if you know how to draw, you could draw bones, but you're trying to figure out how to draw, and somebody's telling you to draw bones and study anatomy. Well, study of anatomy is all well and good, but I was trying to figure out how to draw. You might even say so that I could draw anatomical elements or bones, muscles, whatever else. It's that kind of thing. So you begin to realize eventually that it's the junk, that literally the physical stuff you're putting on the canvas, that has a one-to-one relationship with nature itself, that this guy starts making a science of. And he does what anybody who knows anything about this field will tell you, and that is that there basically is a form/spatial element, there's a color element, and there's a values element to be managed, to be understood, and to be played with. So I'm just going to give you the overview, though. And so the next line is, considering the sphere, this is him now quote, and you're going to see it on there. Considering the sphere of the painter's activities in another and perhaps simpler way, let's say that from the moment he takes his palette and brushes in hand, his actual subject of study from a fixed focusing point can be likened to a flat curtain with light and dark disturbances producing feelings of shapes and sizes transposed into various chromatic sensations. What's he saying? Well, what I just said. He says all you're going to get is what hits your retina. All you're getting when you look at me right now is you get values. You get some lights, some dark, bigger shapes, some busier areas. You get stuff like that. That's the stuff of the eye. And you get colors, I mean. So he mentions a fixed focusing point. He means if you want to draw something, you need to sit in one place, because if you move over a little bit, it's a whole different drawing. All the parts are in different places in relation to what they were a second ago. So there's a fixed focusing aspect of that he just blithely flows past. By the way, these I think are coming out of notes that were taken by one of his students. So I still have yet to read the lectures and stuff that he did. I haven't found all this stuff yet. Jazz, thank you very much, sent me these, this much, but it looks like there's a significant amount that I don't have here. And I know there's a whole bunch of stuff. He does these things that are in the order of exercises. And apparently it drives students crazy with it. And also apparently there isn't a whole body of his students' work that for us to judge his teaching by. And I often wonder about that problem. I've often said to a student that your job is to understand, is to paint pictures. And when you need to do exercises, do exercises. So for him to have exercises there is great, but I would have rather him treat it like Gamble and say, this is a picture studio. I want you to be good at picture making, and that's going to require you to be good at values, at colors, and all these things. And when you're having a distinct problem, I'm going to show you something, and I want you to go and play with it until you get it, which would be in the class of doing exercises that you yourself very well might make up. I certainly made up all the ones I did. I can't remember if Gamble ever gave me an exercise. Most of them I did in the process of making it that same picture. I'd create exercises for myself, make sure I did those. But these are those things you have to make yourself do because you're not naturally inclined to be ocular. You're much more inclined to say, that's a girl, that's a hair, that's a chair, and try to somehow or other have that help you. And one of the points that Meldrum makes is it does not help you. It compromises you. It makes it hard for you to be objective about what you're looking at. So then he goes on from there. In this region, things don't exist. The awareness of them has no place, and all the subjective perceptions and conceptions derived from objective perceptions are still further removed from the nature of the painter's job. So you don't really want to know what you already know about these things. You want to ignore that, not see that anymore. And he talks at length at other places about how you want to actually learn how to just notice what color it is and what particular color it is in relation to the other two colors in the room. So it begins to be this organizational process of retinal data. Okay, so. So his difficulty lies in the acquirement of the ability to remain at the source of all percepts and concepts, okay, derived through the organ of sight. So one of the things you'll see, Gamble used to say to us, you have to watch out for presumptions, assumptions. Watch out for what you think you know. And he complained, as I've said before, about a young man who came in trying to study with Gamble, and Gamble said of this young man, he said, he sees with his ears what people have told him. That's the great fear you have. It isn't just what people told you, it's what you told yourself. When you see what's happening in a particular place, you'll be so compromised by that. Well, just notice, as looking at the thing as if it were a two-dimensional plane, which is what your retina is, it's a two-dimensional plane, just look on it. And if you notice a shape over here, and then you notice the shape over here, then your job is to get those shapes to talk, to play to each other, right? To be right to each other. Your job isn't to understand anything about anatomy, okay? That's your first job. And once you've gotten into this job, you'll realize that the rest of the jobs are nothing but compromises. They cause problems. They don't give solutions. Okay? And I am talking about anatomy studies, even perspective study. And don't think for a minute that I think you should be ignorant of either of those things. You just have to be, and this is his point he's making, is you have to know how to not be thinking about them right now. Make sure you know how to keep them out of your way, because it's going to block your ability to be objective about the visual facts. Okay. I don't know how many times we believed, and I've been other people believed that skin tones were particular things, right? The skin tones are just color notes, and depending on the setting and the backgrounds and all these sort of things, skin tone's going to be red or blue or whatever, even the same person. It's going to have a different quality in relation to other things. And so there is no skin tone. There's no skin tone to paint. I did have a student once ask me, she said, why don't you tell me the secret of skin tones? She said, tell me just what color do I use to make skin tones? And I said, well, you use the palette. You see the palette? There's red, yellow, blue, and there's white and dark. Well, could you consider that maybe we make it out of that? Oh, she said, you artists, you're always holding back the secrets. Right? Oh my God, no, not even a little. No? Every spot, red, yellow, and blue. I mean, that's if you don't learn anything from Monet, but any painter knows that. Before Monet, past Monet, you have to understand that if you're painting from life at least, that note to be better has got to be either more red, more yellow, or more bluer. More blue. Anyway. So then he says, don't set out to make a picture. A picture is only a byproduct of the accumulation of the ocular effects demonstrated on your canvas. Hunter used to say that. Stop trying to make pictures. Well, that's what he's talking about. I have no idea if Hunter ever saw this book, by the way, Robert Douglas Hunter. So don't forget what your job is. Don't go poaching on the preserves of the writer, the musician, or the physician. The most marvelous story you can tell is the sublime one of nature's visual facts. And man, is that not our job. And I tell you that. I've told you that before. What more do you want? No other scientist has a greater mission or a finer subject. Wow. So what's not to like? That's just the point. That's precisely the point, right? It's the beauty, it's the music that hits your, it's the play of things, ocular, hitting your retina. It's just those things, color, values, line, so to speak. All right. Now he says, the test the truth of this statement by trying to paint some simple subject, such as a cup on a table, against a plain background. The result will surely be of a hybrid nature, a small amount of objective realization and a large amount of useless symbolic statements on fact, having nothing to do with appearances. Now there you go again, because when you think you know something about a cup, you will not see what the cup's actually doing. You won't see the angles right. You won't see the oval, the ellipse right, etc. So he'll find that in many parts of the work, he's symbolized many facts on tangible edges which weren't seen, the sense of touch in this respect being the most persistent intruder in the field of appearances. Now, I think that, by the way, that the sense of touch is an assistant if you know how to use it, but that's another story. This experiment, if honestly conducted, will prove that the act of being entirely objective can only be learned through countless demonstrations. And so it means he's fundamentally saying that you need to paint lots of pictures doing this, just obeying the color relation, just getting those. That's why the most beautiful lesson, in a sense, that a beginner can do, if you just stop trying to make pictures, is go out anywhere, sit in the room anywhere, don't even try to compose it, just point your canvas at something and paint the relationships of the color, of the values, of the abstractions that as they hit your eye, and to know nothing about what is the classic naive eye. And that begins the process of getting you objected to the idea that they're just visual facts. This is a world of visual facts, and your job is actually to collate the data, collate the visual facts, get them to do to each other what they're doing. And in that process, you'll discover there's actually music going on. You'll actually see things that you've never seen before, and you will never see if you pursue the other approach. Okay? If you pursue things as the realist object, you're heading down a different road. Okay? Just letting you know if you hadn't seen that. So I'm going to give you one last one. This, I guess you could almost read it on the back. It's the same thing. The painter, confronted with the infinity of tones, forms, and colors presented by nature, is made aware that he must generalize and classify them into mentally controllable orders and families. Now, generalize and classify. So values is a generalization, right? But there's a classification between light and dark, right? Now, chroma is a classification, and there's a range between the highly chromatic ones and the less chromatic ones. And yet, within the highly chromatic ones, there's classifications. What's the most chromatic of the most chromatic notes? We talk about effects, and we say the same exact thing. You blow your eyes down, you'll see the top 5 and 6 effects. And your job is to classify them in relation to each other. After having classified them, or generalized about them, you could argue, some of those aren't really fine ways of talking about it, but that's what I teach. And by the way, having read his stuff, it's virtually everything he said I say to students. So I guess that's the argument that I'm coming from the same place. But there's just enough of the way that he does it that if you heard me and heard him, or if you heard, say, Benson and then heard him, you'd begin to realize that somewhere in there is this gold nugget of this other way of thinking, which some people want to call impressionism. And I don't mind it if the word means that the impression of the visual phenomenon sitting in front of you on your eye. But if you mean Monet, and if you mean broken color and some of those really third-rate and eighth-rate painters that's hung around Monet, the ones that are celebrated today by the modern art world, that's a different story. But we're talking about something very much bigger and more important than that. And that is why we talk about, for example, Velázquez. Because we're not just talking about the modern world of broken color with guys who look like they have never had a clue about drawing. So let me just get on to this last piece of this again. The necessity, so you got that, to generalize and classify them, to permit, and into mentally controllable. Follow that idea, mentally controllable. Your job is actually see things and then work with them. Use your mind. Get a concept of how they relate to each other and work with them. Okay? The mind has got to come into play here. You really cannot do this without being a thinker. But you're not thinking about what you used to. So controllable orders and families. Again, that's all it means by families, is things like values and effects or things like that. But it's all visual, right? It's not muscles and bones, okay? It's just not our world. That's the world of biology, okay? Let it go. You want to be a doctor? That might be a really good one to study. And to permit him to devise a pigmental formula, which will give back the obvious characteristics of the problem. So a pigmental formula, that just means one mat of your paint, your junk that you're painting with, right? So you realize that on your palette here is all the stuff you need to make this visual world. This visual world is just a function of darker, lighter, redder, bluer, blah, 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 right? And bigger, smaller, and in the right locations. And if you understand that, then your job is to learn mastery of the play of visual phenomena, the names of them first. As I always say when students are starting with me, I'm trying to name the pig. I'm trying to get you to know the names of things. And then the second part, of course, is to gain this mental mastery, the play of things. I constantly have to say, even to advanced students, do you realize it's not about what they are, it's what they're doing. It's the play of things, okay? What they're doing in relation to each other. That takes you, if you just even sitting here looking at me, if you look at a particular mass, say this red here, and who knows what other reds are showing up in this room, if you just see 3 reds at once, you'll begin to realize they're doing something in relation to each other. Oh, by the way, this blue to this red, and maybe a yellow, maybe my skin tones or something, will be doing something. You begin to feel something there, right? And that thing that it's doing is what you have to achieve on your canvas with your pigments. And so the last thing, the necessity for control over the phenomena of appearances from their fundamental characteristics. And again, we're just talking about naming the pigs. You add in it, we're talking about basically all those things: color, size, effect, but all the stuff, form, the things that can be made out of the stuff, the things that occur, not people, not names, not complex stuff like that. It's too hard for you, actually. You can't be a master of that. So the necessity for control over the phenomena of appearances from their fundamental characteristics is an ever-increasing one, for as the art of depiction becomes more and more complex and spontaneously intelligible, so the mental control of the methods employed becomes more imperative and exacting. So, but that's just the kind of thing he's talking about. And as I said, I find this, unfortunately, complicated. He wants to talk like a scientist. And, and I far prefer, and I think you can probably pick it up in what I'm saying here, I much prefer to talk like a painter. I tell students, are you going to believe, are you going to believe what people tell you? You're going to believe your lying eyes. Basic things. What do your eyes tell you? What do your eyes tell you? Not what does your head tell you? What do your thoughts tell you? And that's where this guy is really so totally on target.